Well, welcome to Meet in the Middle, News Talk 870 KFLD. And ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the wonderful world of radio. This is a prime example of what happens when you have a petulant computer. And just a brief insight, Christine, to the world of radio, and of course you know this from television.
Yeah.
The world is run by computers. We have what we probably consider the most premier digital delivery system in the world, but even then the computers go down, and so I was on the phone with tech support. We got it back up, and I was able to put the hammer away. Sometimes you just hold the hammer up to the computer, and it kind of goes, and it
Oh,
fixes
okay,
itself.
so John, see, you're saying it's tech support, and you're saying it's hammer, but Margaret Lay and I are saying it's the power of prayer. That is our topic today.
That has been
so let
used
us say,
before,
John,
and it has
that
worked.
that is what brought us back. So
2 o'clock in the morning with a failing audio card that won't let you play
Yeah.
commercials. You take it out, clean it off, blow the dust out, and it works, and you're like, oh, 2 in the morning on a weekend, and it can get you through to Monday. So,
all right,
yes.
well, let's jump into it. What
All
our
right.
topic is today is the power of prayer. And my guest is Margaret Lay. She is a chaplain with the Tri-Cities Cancer Center. So Margaret, thank you so much. I really appreciate that you are here today to talk with us about this.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm really pleased to be here, and I can say one thing about prayer already. It does not depend on a computer. It's available
There you go.
anytime you want it.
Anytime. Okay, so from your setting, from your position as a chaplain, I mean, what is prayer?
Well, basically, prayer is communication. It's being able to talk with God, and it's being able to talk with your heart, your head, your gut, with words, with whatever you need to do. It's simply communicating with God.
Mm-hmm. So that is one direction, and some say that your intuition is actually messages coming back to you.
Mhm.
Do you think that?
I do.
Yeah.
I think that there's a number of ways that we can also hear from God.
Mhm.
I don't ever hear voices myself. Some people claim they do, or they have intuition, or they're surprised by things that happen in their life that someone might say is a coincidence, but they see it as a sign.
Mm-hmm. So in a medical setting like the Tri-Cities Cancer Center and your work there, how is prayer used? I mean, the Tri-Cities Cancer Center is not a religious organization.
Correct.
It's a medical institution. So you are a chaplain, and many of our hospitals here have chaplains as well. So how is prayer used?
Well, prayer, we're not a religious institution, but we have people who have a sense of faith, and people who are oftentimes in a crisis or have questions, may have doubts, and so prayer becomes a conversation, and faith becomes a conversation. And prayer, it depends on each individual. Sometimes prayer, people are comfortable having someone pray for them. Sometimes people are, it's very personal and very private. It's something that they do on their own. I usually ask if prayer is meaningful for people at a different time, or how they would like prayer to be. And people are always welcome to say, no, I don't need prayer, or I don't want prayer, and free to say it in a way that doesn't make them look like they're not spiritual or not a
Mhm.
good person.
Right.
Prayer is something that's very individual.
Mm-hmm. Well, you reminded me that we met some 4 years ago when I was actually a patient and a client at the cancer center getting some radiation for breast cancer. What did I say to you? I don't remember. That was 4 years ago. I would be curious, and I would compare it to what I think today. So what did I say? Do you remember?
Well, I think that we probably had a very casual conversation. I think I let you know that I was a chaplain. I take my cues from the people that I meet. I think, as I recall, I think you were very focused on treatment, as many of our patients are, and very polite. But I don't know that you were necessarily. You were conversational, which is what most of my conversations are.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't recall, because I don't recall anything about prayer at that time in my life, but let me tell you today, Margaret, I would ask you to pray for me. I think that people can utilize all the help that they get.
Yeah.
And part of what I wanted to share with people today is some of the healing power, or at least for us to examine it. So let me share with folks a couple of things that I have run across. And now a lot more research is being done in this area. I mean, hardcore research looking at the differences if people are prayed for or pray themselves in terms of what happens to them. So heart patients are 14 times more likely to die following surgery if they did not participate in a religion. Elderly people who never or rarely attended church had a stroke rate double that of people who attended regularly. So there's always today a lot of question between religion and spirituality being a lot wider. But what do we know about some of the research that is being done today?
There is a lot of research and a lot of interest, and I tend to be a little bit skeptical because I'm going to ask the question, what does that mean? If somebody reads an article and finds that prayer has a significant difference, are they going to start praying because they want that significant difference? Which is sort of a communication that says, I want something. And,
Yes.
and yes, that's true, but is there something more than that, or is there another value? And if we get the things we want, what do we do with it? Christine, I'm going to give you an example of a little friend, a child who prayed, went to bed at night, praying for snow the next day. He woke up in the morning to 14 inches of snow, and he didn't pray for 3 months after that.
So sometimes you have to be afraid of what you want, huh? You have to, yes.
Or you realize,
be prepared to get it.
or what's on the other end of prayer, you know, and what are you praying to, or who, and how do you view that person that you're praying to? We've looked at studies. There's one on breast patients who talk to their doctors, and if they have a good communication where the doctor is able to help that patient feel involved in the consult, and it gives them information that says more than just say your tumor is 2 centimeters, but says your tumor is less than 2 centimeters, and that's a favorable thing. If a physician is communicating and positive and supportive, that patient actually feels more hopeful. So I'm thinking about when we pray, just not just the aspect of prayer, but who are we praying to, and how do we see God? Do we see God as somebody who's favorable to us, or do we see God as somebody that we have to appease with a duty that we perform? So those play into some of the questions about this research, and how are we looking at what exactly are we doing, and what do we believe to happen?
Yeah, but for some people it's a start.
Right.
So if there is a carrot that creates that start,
Yes.
I say more power to it. Why not?
Right.
If you have any experiences with prayer and illness, or a prayer and anything in your life, and you want to share those, we'd love to hear them today. Our phone number is 547-8726. So what we also are learning is that more medical institutions, training institutions that train doctors basically, in the past have never really included any training about how God, spirit, whatever you believe is the higher power, affects people's lives. That wasn't in the medical training, but more and more institutions are providing some kind of training. How do you think that that is helpful to us, general public, who deals with the medical profession?
Well, I think, again, it's individual. I think if people can have a physician pray for them because that's what they want, that's important. I think people need to also feel safe to say, no, it wouldn't be helpful right now, and not feel like they're going to alienate their physician. That would be important. I think that when patients do pray with their physicians, what I hear is that actually helps them feel more connected to their physician, and helps them open up and be able to say more things than they probably would have said before. So that might build the trust relationship to feel safe about something like prayer.
Well, I want to go back to the Tri-Cities Cancer Center. So give us some examples of the kinds of things that you do as a chaplain there in the Cancer Center.
I meet with patients for different ways. I will have a referral, say from a physician or for a nurse to meet with a patient. Patients can refer themselves to chaplains. And I also am available, and I often sit down and start up a conversation with somebody. I let them know that I am a chaplain. People need to know they're talking with a chaplain. But I usually begin conversations with, tell me about you and what's happening to you right now. And I let people know I'm part of a team of care providers, so that they know that they have a high level of confidence that I actually have a reason to be there, and I'm plugged in, that their physicians and nurses and staff know that I'm part of the team. So, and I think that it says something about the Cancer Center, that they also have somebody whose ears to their patients, listening to what patients' concerns are, and approaches that question from another school of thought, if you will. Somebody who's paying attention to the person that the patient is, their values, their beliefs, how it was for them to just come to the Cancer Center that day, and just really paying attention to the finer details that also have an impact on the whole person, their sense of wellness, their sense of belonging, their sense of being cared for.
Mm-hmm. What about people who basically don't believe in God or a higher power?
I enjoy conversations, frankly, with people who would start off by saying I'm an atheist or I'm agnostic.
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes I ask questions like, well, tell me about the God you don't believe in. And people usually, sometimes I agree with them when they describe what they don't believe, and I often find common ground by realizing that's not exactly who I believe in either. It's interesting to hear what people put their trust in. I think if we had a very broad definition of God, it would be God is whoever you put your trust in, or whatever you put your trust in. And so we can have conversations around, what do you trust, or what do you hope for, or what gives you meaning in your life. Those are also faith-based questions without necessarily being about God in a religious sense.
Mm-hmm.
And many people find religion is not helpful, even though they may be very spiritual. And sometimes religion, we see the aspects of religion that are fanatical or dogmatic, and people are looking for some place to be where they're safe and they're loved and they're going to be supported. And finding a sense of spirituality and finding rest in a being that loves them and cares for them is important.
Mm-hmm. Well, culturally, we seem to be moving away from what would be considered organized religion. From my point of view, it's a lot of rules, and moving more towards spirituality, which is your personal relationship with whatever you believe. So it seems that there probably are a lot more people, when they fill out a form, for example, in any kind of a medical setting, we're often asked what is our religious faith. What do you find that people put there?
Some people have a religious faith, but I think that primarily people would mark the nun, not meaning they don't have a religious tradition that they associate with,
Mm-hmm.
but they do have a strong sense of faith or spirituality. So it's there, and that is one of the difficulties as we move away from religion, is we lose a language. Religion gives us a common language for
Yeah.
people to talk about faith, and
Mhm.
it gives them a framework that when we move away from religion, people lose the ability to communicate and share some of their deeper thoughts. It gets just more nebulous to talk about spirituality and faith.
Mm-hmm. We want to take a break here, John. I hope our system is working. I want to remind people that, man, I just really would enjoy hearing some of your experiences with the power of healing and the power of prayer. 547-8726. Call us as soon as we get back from this break. We're back in a moment. Welcome back to Meet in the Middle. We're talking about the power of prayer, and if you've got some experiences, I mean, I myself have known folks here in the Tri-Cities who have used prayer, and I really thought, and they shared that with me, that their recovery from this significant illness was, in their view, a miracle, and I viewed it that way too. Boy, that was a very, very significant illness. But Margaret Lay is our guest today, and Margaret is a chaplain with Tricities Cancer Center. I wanted to talk a little bit about praying for others, not just yourself, but like prayer circles and those kinds of things. So I want to read this little piece of research. Not only has prayer been shown to add to our longevity, it also affects the quality of our lives. Many of the studies that have been done in this regard are quite dramatic. Now, here's an example. In a recent study conducted by Roger Lobo, he's with Columbia University, a group of 199 women undergoing in vitro fertilization were randomly assigned to be prayed for by a group of strangers in the United States, Canada, and Australia. Neither the women's doctors nor the women themselves were aware of this. The researchers expected that the results would show no benefit from prayer. They were astonished when the normally low success rate of in vitro fertilization, ranging anywhere from 22 to 26%, jumped to 50% for these women. So, that's pretty significant, and I know that oftentimes people ask to have others pray for them, or they are the subject of like a prayer circle. What has been your experience with that?
I've encountered people who, the first thing they'll say to me is, when they know I'm a chaplain, they'll say, "Oh, I'm glad to meet you, and I have so many people praying for me." And the immediate benefit for that patient is the sense of connection, that there are people who are maybe in even different faiths of their own who are praying for them, and they feel more confident about what they're doing, where they are in their own experiencing, knowing that they've got this deep sense of connection. I think it's another way for somebody who loves someone who's going through a cancer experience to show their love and to pray for them. I also think that sometimes when people are highly anxious or maybe even angry or fearful, it gets hard for them to pray. And I'm often able to say to people, right now, what you need to do is focus on your health and resting. And this is the time when you can cease praying and let others pray for you.
Mm-hmm.
And that comes as good news, that people don't always have to feel this burden to pray. I would be concerned if people feel that prayer becomes legalistic or something that they have to do religiously, and that they base all their outcome on how they pray. But to know that other people can pray for them, and to ask for that, and to seek that.
But I wouldn't ever want people to think today that I or others believe that if we pray really hard that we're going to be cured or that we will be healed. So how do you eliminate doubt?
That's a great question. Sometimes I find it in myself, and in both ways. Sometimes I've prayed for people and they've gotten well, and I thought, wow, how did that happen? Sometimes I minimize the power of prayer, but I also know plenty of times where people are disappointed. The prayers that they prayed and the things that they wanted didn't happen. Sometimes the prayer that they prayed might be that the answer comes in ways they didn't expect. Maybe there's a growth that is happening. Maybe there's a different avenue that the prayer takes place. People have an aha moment and they realize what they were praying for wasn't what they got, and their disappointment in the time seemed disappointing, but maybe it led to something else. sometimes people are well even as they die. And sometimes that is because
They are well as they die. What does that mean?
it means that they are open, they are still experiencing the people around them, they have a radiance about them. They're not anxious, and they're able to engage with other people, even in advanced stages of an illness. And it's because they've grabbed onto something else besides an outcome. They've grabbed onto a sense of whatever is meaningful to them, and they have a deep sense of purposefulness or accomplishment in their life. And one man I encountered in the hospital, and he was going to be going into hospice, and he was radiant. And I said to him, I want you to know that all the people at the cancer center are, thinking of you, and I'm here to just, say hello to you from them. And he just smiled and said, tell them all, hello from me. And that kind of interchange is, to me, speaks of wellness, that connection and that ability to have peace and confidence, even when your outward circumstances might say something else.
Mm-hmm. I believe that happens with a lot of people as they get close to death. And not a sudden death, but like an illness or whatever. Doesn't there just seem to be that period of time where it is acceptance? I don't know what is going on in their brain. I think it would be really interesting to know, and you are lucky enough to be able to talk to some of those people. But there is this sense of acceptance and peacefulness that comes, and calmness that comes over people before they die.
Yes, I call it a letting go. It's a kind of a releasing of all the things that you hang on to, and receiving the moment for what it is. Maybe in some ways death is often a lot like birth. There is a transference that's happening. There's a letting go of one environment, of a known world, and entering into something else. And death sometimes strikes me as a birth, watching a birth process happening. It's different for each person. There are no absolute rules of how that goes, but I often observe that sense of peace when people can let go and have trust and confidence in that they're entering into something else, and they're being held in that process, held with love and support.
Mm-hmm. Well, it certainly is good for family that surround people, because that makes family more comfortable as well as they're, as someone is leaving them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What other kinds of things have you seen as it relates to being a chaplain and working in the Tri-Cities Cancer Center situation? You've been there for 10 years.
Right. The growth is what amazes me in people. I learn from the patients still, as they go through their experiences, and oftentimes I hear, I would never have chosen this experience, but what I have learned in the process is amazing, or the people that I have met, and people share some of the experiences in ways that their lives are opened. I think one thing that's different about a chaplain visit as opposed to a counselor visit is I often give people the permission to make the time with me what they need it to be. And I have encountered people who will often stop in the middle of a sentence, and they'll say, well, can I say this? And I'll say, go ahead, say what you need to. Because they feel that somehow they're sort of filtering their thoughts. And I give them permission to say what they need to say. I'm not there to direct the conversation or provide a therapy necessarily. And people often move into this area of doubts and fears, and I don't correct that. I encourage people to ask why. I encourage people to have their doubts, and I encourage them to have their anger, and let them know that I don't think that God is going to be offended by that.
Mm-hmm.
I think that that it prayer is truly communication, then open your heart and let God know what's in your heart, including the doubts or the angers. That's the best place to bring those feelings. And trust that God can handle that. We don't have to clean ourselves up to pray. We don't have to wait for the right time when all the computers are working. It can come spontaneously anytime, any place. And I just think that the deeper we grow in prayer and that process of opening up the dark places in our life to God and letting those be explored, and then we grow in our ability to do that with other people and learn how to build relationships. Starts with God, it moves out into deepening all of our relationships.
Well, when people get a cancer diagnosis, it can be pretty overwhelming and creates also this reflection on one's life. What has my life been?
Yes.
And is my life going to continue, of course? Yeah.
It's even when people go through this experience with the minimal amount of, that was an early stage, very few little treatment interventions, people will still often remark, it happened to me. And just along what you said, they realize I'm mortal too. Something like that always happens to everybody else, it can happen to me. And that does change our perspective. It makes us think about priorities, or it makes us think about life is going quicker than I thought it would go. And that kind of information is actually a gift. It helps us become wise. It helps us spend our time and our attentions on the things that matter and to figure out what does matter. At some point we realize we're not going to live forever. So how do I make it count? And how do I get rid of the distractions and the things that just amount to nothing but wasted time? And how do I find what matters? And oftentimes I think people's prayers change. Maybe they start off praying for longer life, but maybe they change to what is my life about? How am I called? How am I gifted? What's my place? What's my purpose? What would people miss when I'm on? What have I added? What have I changed?
Wow, so for some people, a diagnosis of cancer is actually a good thing.
Well,
If it creates that opportunity for them to look. Now, not everybody is going to agree with that or think that their diagnosis was, but I think that when people look back on the process, then, and they have survived it, and it created this new opening that you're talking about, that was probably a good thing.
Well, you're touching on a sensitive area of prayer, and that is, we want to see prayer with the benefits for coping and the benefits for longer life. But sometimes prayer invites suffering. And how do we decide what's good or bad? Sometimes because we pray, we may have difficulties, and maybe those difficulties are a way for us to gain a new dimension in our life, broaden us, deepen us, make us more connected in ways that we suffer as human beings. Maybe ultimately that is how people connect with each other.
Well, this has been a pretty deep conversation for the noon hour here. But Margaret Lay, I really, really appreciate you coming in as chaplain of the Tri-Cities Cancer Center and talking to us today about the power of prayer, its healing value, and just what it means for folks. And I think the timing is good, being around the Christmas time as well. And at any point that you wish to pray for me, I will gladly accept it. And you know what? I think I'll pray for you too, okay?
I think that would be wonderful.
All right. Hey, we're back in a moment here. Stay with us on Meet in the Middle on this Friday.